Hello, this is Raghav's take. I was surprised, by the reaction to my previous video questioning a very big what if of history. What if India's democracy was built on proportional representation or PR? That was the video I did just before this one. Several knowledgeable people actually weighed in, responded to my question, saying the question is moot given the majoritarian evolution of our state. Some even called for a fresh debate on the merits of PR versus FPTP, that's first past the post. Others went actually beyond, suggesting that India should seriously consider remodeling how she elects governments, injecting various elements of proportional representation to make our parliament truly and scientifically representative. But there were also others whose argument was, sure, you cited the success of PR in highly developed European and other evolved democracies. But most of these countries are rich, homogeneous societies. As opposed to this, India faced existential conflicts in 1947. We had grinding poverty, illiteracy, and an emaciated population, an ignitable diversity of religions, languages, and regional disparities, a cauldron of communal strife. Remember the partition. The threat of political balkanization among hundreds of princely states and semi autonomous provinces. So they asked me, these readers asked me, these viewers asked me, show us one example of a country which faced similar challenges but used proportional representation to neutralize them. It's a challenging question, but one that can be credibly answered. Rewind to South Africa in 1990, on the verge of abolishing apartheid. Like India in 1947, South Africa was threatened by volcanic instability. Over the previous half century, its native black population had endured cruel minority white rule under the National Party. The barbarity of apartheid is a well documented historical fact that need not be exerted here in this video. We take that as a given. Therefore, the danger was that an angry, triumphal outbreak of vengeance and violence by the black majority, that would have been catastrophic for the whites. And they comprised about 15% of the population, which is eerily similar to the demographic strength of Muslims in post-partition India at independence. The horrors of India's partition could have found a dangerous echo in South Africa in the 1990s. But there was another equally inflammable ethnic crisis within the black majority population. Remember, over 3,000 people were killed in vicious clashes in KwaZulu-Natal, KZN. That was the province where this conflict existed between Nelson Mandela's African National Congress, which is the ANC, and Chief Buthelezi's Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP. Founded in 1975, IFP was a fiercely ethnic political party of Zulu-speaking blacks. So while they opposed President de Klerk's National Party, IFP was perhaps even more fearful of living under ANC's domination in a post-apartheid South Africa. Its Inkatha youth brigades were a paramilitary force capable of inflicting a fratricidal civil war. The prospect of KZN's secession was actually fearsome, palpable. Mercifully, inspired by Nelson Mandela, South Africa's constitutional bargaining process was largely consensual. As soon as apartheid ended in 1990, the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA, was set up to draft the constitution. And this was equivalent to India's Constituent Assembly, with one vital difference. While India's forum was dominated by the Indian National Congress, South Africa's had strong representation from the whites and the Zulus, who stiffly opposed the African National Congress. That explains, in a sense, how India's Constituent Assembly adopted FPTP, first past the post, without as much as a cursory assessment of proportional representation. While CODESA and its successor entity, the Multi-Party Negotiating Forum, the MPNF, spent considerable energy on the relative merits of a Westminster-style FPTP, first past the post system, which India adopted, versus the German MMP, which is the mixed member proportional representation, versus list PR, versus other hybrid models of democratic elections. Like India's Congress leaders, even Nelson Mandela initially flirted with the idea of first past the post, FPTP. Obviously, the ANC leaders were also tempted by the prospect of a sweeping majority, and Mandela was confident that his party would remain liberal and centrist. "Don't expect me to negotiate myself out of power," cried a defiant President de Klerk. But he also wasn't a spoiler. His principal negotiator, Rolf Meyer, said the aim of the National Party government has always been that the system of representation that we had prior to the change would not work in the new constitutional system. But a proportional representation electoral system will act as vehicles for minorities. End quote. Chief Buthelezi pushed back even harder against any majoritarian misadventure. I quote him: "Inkatha warns the ANC that the pursuit of winner takes all politics is dangerous in the extreme." End quote. At this point, Mandela's Gandhian instinct of peaceful accommodation kicked in quite quickly. And here's a quote from him: "Majority rule and internal peace are like two sides of a single coin. While South Africa simply has to accept that there will never be peace and stability in this country until the principle of democratic majority rule is fully applied, but we have committed ourselves to one person, one vote elections on the basis of proportional representation to ensure that every political formation which has any degree of support would have a place in the Constituent Assembly." Ultimately, South Africa conducted its first multiracial election with a supremely low threshold of participation. Every party that got 0.25%, I mean, that's really low. A mere 0.25% of the popular vote, that party would also get its listed nominee in the National Assembly. Now, what happened when the elections were held? Over 19.7 million votes were counted. ANC won overwhelmingly with 62% of the vote, and therefore 252 seats in the 400-member assembly. Just to contrast this, if a 62% vote share had happened in the first past the post system, perhaps ANC would have won 390 out of 400 seats. They got 252 under this proportional representation method. The heroic Nelson Mandela was elected president. The white National Party actually won a very creditable 20% of the vote, getting 82 seats and the vice presidentship for F.W. de Klerk. Inkatha got over 10.5% of the vote and 43 seats in the House. Chief Buthelezi became Minister of Home Affairs in the Mandela cabinet. Inkatha also bulldozed to over 50% of the vote in the provincial legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, KZN. Buthelezi continued to perform his traditional role as the Prime Minister to the King of Zulus. All was well, and it ended well. So once dreaded as implacably fraught, the transition of power in post-apartheid South Africa was actually incredibly democratic and balanced and peaceful. the lion's share of the credit must go to Mandela's statesmanship, but also to the egalitarian impulse of the proportional representation method, the PR method of electing a government. And this just reinforces the question that I had left dangling at the end of my earlier video. What if India had built its democracy on the proportional representation, PR system of elections? This was Raghav's take today.